Yesteryears, Chapter 2. Visitors from a Foreign Shore. In the springtime of the year 1540, the Indians of the Mohican villages along the course of the waterway later called the Hudson witnessed a remarkable sight. Strange craft, unlike anything these natives had before seen, were discovered ascending the river. From the decks of these vessels rose tall spars to which were rigged great squares of canvas that filled to the wind, and as if by some magic, though no one was seen to paddle, these boats were being gently wafted upstream. They were so much larger and unlike the Indian canoes, and this, coupled with the fact that the crew aboard wore a strange and monstrous garb, was a spectacle the Indians viewed with awe. The visitors meant no harm. They were as friendly as the natives were curious, and in no time at all, as they went ashore in this village and that, any fear that either might have entertained toward the other was quickly dispelled. The visitors had come to trade with them, and had all manner of trinkets and trifles, as well as blankets, hose, and items of clothing, which they were willing to exchange for beaver skins, pompions, grapes, and other possessions of the natives. At the head of this trading expedition was Captain Jean Fontenot, known more familiarly as Alphonse of Santon, chief pilot to Francis I, and perhaps the most experienced navigator of his time. The French people were leaders in maritime enterprise, and the province of Saint-Tong and the port of Rochelle were points of origin for many of the earliest voyages of exploration and discovery to the New World, as well as countless expeditions for trade, hunting, and fishing. Indeed, there is good reason to believe that the French were familiar with the area around Newfoundland before the time of Columbus. In the year 1507, a French voyager counted not less than 17 fishing vessels in the roads of St. John's. Captain Fontenot and his Santongi crew became the first Europeans of record to set foot on the soil of the town of White Creek. Captain Fontenot and his companions were so taken with our locality, and such conviviality and cordial good feeling developed between the Santon crew and the Mohican Hoosacks that the visitors remained throughout 2 summers. The French kings were zealots in the work of spreading Catholicism among the heathen people, and Francis I, the reigning monarch at this time, was bent on carrying Christian doctrine to the far corners of the earth. In accordance with these aims, several Roman Catholic priests accompanied Alphonse on his voyage, and the men of the flowing black robe and the cross gave Christian names to the various localities where they set up mission schools and chapels for the Indians. At Green Island, opposite Troy, where they labored with the Mohican warriors of Chief Macquan, they christened the locality St. Ange, the place of the Holy Angel, and also to honor their native province. The meadowland along the Hoosic between the Owlkill and the Walloomsac, partly in the town of White Creek, partly in the town of Hoosic, was christened St. Croix, and here both a chapel and a mission school were erected. On maps of New France, circa 1577, and on Champlain's map, these sites are clearly marked. At this time, writes Miss Niles, the Hoosic historian and author, partridge berries and strawberries grew along the edges of the fields, and grapevines embowered the oak and the pine groves. The owl, Captain Soquan of the Hoosic Bears, and the hero, Captain Macquan of the Mac and Heatsack Wolves, feasted on bear, wolf, venison, corn cake, squash, or pumpkin, known as vine-apple, and succotash. They quenched their thirst with water from the hillside fountains, and knew nothing of grape juice or crab-apple brandy, or the lightning weapons of the sky until the arrival of the French, English, and Dutch Christians in 1609. The following excerpt from the writings of Jean Fontenot, which have been translated from the Old French by Mrs. Paul Jones of White Creek, reveals the high opinion he held of the natural advantages of our White Creek locality, and the fine prospects he entertained for French interests here. I went in at a bay between Norumbega and Florida in the 42nd degree, and I have not searched the end thereof, and I know not whether it passed through. And in all this country there are oaks and borts, ashes, elms, maples, pines, spruce, trees, wild grapes, and there have even been found red plums. And very fair corn groweth here, and peas grow of their own accord, gooseberries and strawberries. and there are goodly forests wherein men may hunt, and there are great stores of stags, deer, horse-picks, and the savages say there be unicorns. Fowl there are in abundance, as bustards, wild geese, cranes, and turtle doves, ravens, crows, and many other birds. All things which are sown there are not past 2 or 3 days in coming up out of the ground. They have told in 1 ear of corn 120 grains, like the corn of France. And if the country were tilled and replenished with people, it would be as hot as Rochelle. And the reason why it snoweth oftener there than in France is because it rains there less often, for the rain is converted into snows. All things above mentioned are true. Signed, Jean Alphonse. Edno. Champlain's map of New France in 1628, and the maps before the year 1600 show the 42nd degree of latitude running directly through the Hoosic Valley. Actually, White Creek lies between the 42nd and 43rd degree. But we must remember that this was before the invention of the sextant, and calculations were made by use of the astrolabe, a less accurate measuring instrument. It was a sad occasion when the Hoosacs and Mohicans bade farewell to their guests in the autumn of the year 1541. But the memory of that visit was long cherished in the hearts of the simple forest folk, and became the golden legend of the Hoosacs. The names the Santon priests gave to the 2 mission sites in Green Island and White Creek have survived into this day, in the altered spellings of Nastagion and Sancroft. Jean Fontenot was not only the chief pilot of Francis I, but later acted as chief pilot for Count Roberval's expedition to colonize the region of the St. Lawrence, which Jacques Cartier had explored in 1534. Fontenot did considerable writing on the subject of navigation and his life as a trader. Several charts prepared by him and a cosmography now in the Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, have been handed down. Perhaps his work of the most far-reaching significance and greatest impact upon the destiny of mankind was a small volume, The Voyages and Adventures of Captain Jean Alphonse, Santongios, containing the rules and instructions for safe navigation, also the way to conduct oneself toward the savages as towards one's own countrymen, the kind of merchandise which is found in abundance and procured for a small amount, for trading with the savages, so as to make the greatest profit. Beyond peradventure of a doubt was this small booklet, falling into the hands of enterprising Dutch and English merchantmen, that led to the formation of the great trading companies of the early 17th century, and culminated in the period of exploration and settlement, spearheaded by Hendrik Hudson's voyage of 1609. After a seafaring life of 41 years, Alphonse was killed towards the end of the year 1557 in a naval battle with the Spaniards near Rochelle. Thus ended the life of a man whose vision penetrated the future, who, unlike his contemporaries, saw the promise of the New World in a fresh light, a country to be tilled and replenished with people, a region rich in opportunities for trade and commerce, while others sought vainly for a passage through, or plundered the natives of what gold and riches they had. Fontenot spoke boldly of trade and colonization. He stirred the imaginations of men of enterprise, who moved swiftly to implement his suggestions. In truth, as this man perished in 1557, generations then unborn were to benefit from his having lived, as the events of the following century were to prove. There is not too much I can say on Chapter 2. Jean Fontenot did exist. He was known by several names, and he did travel up the east coast from Florida to Norumbega, which is the main New Brunswick area. He may well have put in at a bay along the way, probably more than one, but his writings are all in 16th century French, and no English translations are available. His history is also rather vague and disputed. Some claim he was Portuguese, others French. He lived in France, went ashore, and had a Portuguese wife. Like many sea captains at the time, he wasn't above piracy on occasion and once bragged about looting Puerto Rico. It would be interesting to find out more about him. He, like the other early captains, was looking for a passage through the American continent to get to East Indies, and if he sailed up what later was called the Hudson, he couldn't have made it any farther than the Albany area, and would have immediately recognized neither the Hudson nor Mohawk went through to anywhere. But the account given indicates he didn't know, so if it was the Hudson, it was unlikely he got that far north, much less to White Creek, far off any navigable waterways. Most modern historians believe the name Sandquark is Mohican in origin, and not derived from St. Croix. No records have been discovered of French missions in the area.